Here we are this morning. I just wanted to share a little bit about my life. Isn't anything special, but as I've gone back and taken a look at how I've lived my life, I found myself highs and lows. I have not been I didn't follow the normal, or I tried to follow the normal recommendations after I graduated to going on to college. And there was a part of me that kept yearning to travel, and not until I was in college that I realized that I could travel, and had an opportunity to have a hobby of hula dancing that took on a lifetime passion for me. And I just wanted to share that, you know, when you can go back and reflect several decades, I'm not a spring chicken anymore. And I'm finding myself that I kind of had to go on a early forced retirement. My husband had a stroke 4.5 years ago. Actually, it was 4 years ago, October 17th, 2020. And that was kind of an interesting time of our lives because COVID was, we were just kind of going through mid-COVID. And when you have a husband that is in the medical times, he had because he was in the hospital and he had to do with the medical, his medical healings during the COVID times, we did not have access to a normal face-to-face on appointments with your doctors. We were isolated, and so because of the isolation, it presented a challenge for me to be able to be with Bill. I chose to be able to walk away from my self-employment project of running a little cafe in a mall. And we had just opened it up 1.5 years ago, and it was a investment of our years of work, and it was going. The concern of it was it was going well, and COVID hits. The lockdown happened. The mall that we were in, the doors were locked, padlocked shut, and the only thing that saved us, we were blessed, we were saved by the mandate that since we were an essential business serving food, we were allowed to be able to have our businesses. Now the challenge was that no one can go into our cafe. We could only do drop by and pick up at curbside. We did that, and what I learned from all of that is that I was realizing that with my husband's stroke condition, he had 2 brain bleeds, and with the 2 brain bleeds, it caused him to be paraplegic, or they call it hemiplegic. You know, when half of your side of your body is paralyzed. And I believe what they mean by paralyzed is there's no sensation and feelings. He was able to move his limbs, but he didn't have any way of controlling that. The brain bleed affected his mobility. In any event, he experienced the 5 week of intense being in ICU, and then also going from there into an intensive rehab hospital. We were blessed to have had him be admitted in for that intensive rehab, and although it was very difficult for Bill, he had to learn how to do everything all over again, how to feed himself, how to go to the bathroom, how to take care of himself, to even speak, to even recognize people. The condition of my husband was he didn't recognize who I was. He didn't even know who I was. So anyways, from that doom and gloom, we were able to have nursing care and health care at home, which meant that in order for him to come home, we needed to have the equipment, the hospital bed, the commodes, all of that We live in a 2-story home, and the bathroom is located upstairs. So that also presented a challenge with Bill being able to shower, etc., etc. So we were blessed. We were very creative in how we could get his shower done. Most of the time it was a sponge bath, but he eventually was able to go from, we'd actually check into a hotel that had handicap ADA access so that he could go in and take his showers. It got a little expensive having him do that. Another friend of ours opened up his home because he had an ADA shower, and so Bill was able to go in and take care of those kinds of duties. And at that time, I had some health issues with my own eyes, so I was not allowed. I was technically legally blind and was not allowed to be able to drive. So we were blessed with having community access, be able to pick us up, and that, which meant it took us busing. We were bused to and from the medical appointments. Bill was on a wheelchair, and Bill's not a small man, so quite interesting to see small me and big Bill in the wheelchair and toting him around, pushing his wheelchair. We had a lot of fun. We acted like tourists when we were on the buses, so it was fun to take a look around and see and just kind of see the sights. So that probably was the first year we navigated through home care, home nursing, in-house therapy. Bill continued to progress, and he moved on from not being able to get up and walk to being able to walk, and as painful as it was as his full-time caregiver or partner, it's sometimes difficult to watch someone who was always so strong and pretty much was my life partner. He was my business partner. We did everything together. So we closed our restaurant at the end of 2020. So this January of 2021. That was interesting. We moved all of our, as we closed out the cafe, right next to it was a cultural center that we had created to be able to offer hula classes and heritage workshops, arts and crafts. We used the cultural center also as our location, on-site location for some of the video work that we were doing. We filmed different interviews. We filmed different artists coming in and teaching workshops. We filmed other activities that was going on. They have a organization here called Fathom of Fun, and it's an organization that is operated by Seroptimus, and they help out the women community here in all kinds of charitable work. So we partnered up with them a little bit on a couple of their events, the Holidays, which is an event in the mall where it's like it's basically a vendor farmer's market type of a thing, a glorified one. So back to closing our cafe. When we closed the cafe and the cultural center, we realized that our home didn't have, we had to rent out several storage units. And during that process, it allowed us both, Bill and I, to, as much as Bill could understand and comprehend, I did have to look into closing up the studio or the buildings in the center. We moved them all to a storage units. All told, I believe there was 5 of them, plus we filled up our garage, and we had a canopy, a trailer canopy, that like a horse trailer, and we filled that up as well. So I found myself with the task of purging and making decisions that normally Bill and I would have done together. And it was very daunting and a little overwhelming to take on the project of reviewing our past, reviewing our business operations. We were in the entertainment industry, the hospitality industry, and as entertainers, you know, you have all the musical equipment and instruments and mics and amplifiers and speakers and all that goes with entertainment. Mic stands. I had a huge collection of tueres and performing drums for our Tahitian and hula ukulele collections. We have probably a dozen or so of musical instruments, and so we found ourselves having to think about decluttering and purging through, sorting through those things that were even business related, cafe related, and retail related. We discovered that we had tons of books and CDs and all of these things. And you know, when you have an opportunity to sort of look through your past and see how our life journeys were, we were blessed. Bill and I were very blessed to have been able to go through all of that. So without boring you on any more of those things, and I think I'd love to talk story more about the different parts of my lives. I'm really thinking about doing a talk story with Napua. All is not lost. These are titles of possible content, YouTube channel or podcast. I was very, very blessed in that one of the benefits of being married to a TV producer and a cameraman, Bill prided himself in his marketing and his promotionals. You'd find him with his phone and a camera, when that was probably the best inventions that could have happened, because Bill was the kind of man that if he had had a camera attached to his hands, he would be taking both photos of and videos of everything. And so he did that with me and offered me an opportunity to host his TV shows. And I had a blast working with him. And I didn't realize he kind of stirred up some different kinds of love and passion that I had. And he understood my curiosity. He understood that I was very curious, and every time I had a conversation with people, I love to talk to people, I love hearing their stories. We would be blessed to learn more about each person. And what I learned was many of these folks that I interviewed are no longer here. And I learned that their legacies and how they lived their lives they lived colorful lives. They wrote books. They went deep into the history of the Kanakas, or the Hawaiian word for man, humankind. And so it was all over the place, the kinds of television experiences that I had. I had an opportunity to interview some very, very interesting people. In fact, one of them I wanted to share is about this Dr. Jim Ho. And this is a book he wrote. And it's an interesting book. It's called The 7 Unsung Hero Fighter Pilots Who Saved This Day, December 7th, 1941. This was the start of that World War II. And interesting that we live in a times right now that possibly there's threats of another war coming up. And I was a little bit, I'm going to get a little political here. And not really political. It's more that I am not a political person. I don't consider myself either Democrat or Republican. I believe, and I am more of an independent. I do believe that there are many, many governing factors that we have to think about. And one of them is that as the United States is one of the greatest countries in the world. I'm saying one of the greatest. I believe that they were considered the greatest. This year was an interesting year, and as time has gone on, I just realized that I got caught up in much of the leaving negativity and kind of getting caught up in the hope and the dreams that we ourselves could turn our country around. And I still believe that the people can, but it has to be led by leaders. And I am a believer that leaders need to be as top standards. I believe that kindness and the concerns for others and taking care of people, I believe that that's what most great leaders have a thought of other people rather than themselves. And so it's an interesting place that we are in. So I was reading this book again, and it's fantastic because it shares, there's a little airport here that is from real close to Haleiwa in Hawaii, that was created, and this is this bulk of this story, is talking about this gentleman, Dr. Jim Ho, and his journey. He actually lived through that. He was one of the young kids who had an opportunity to clear out. There's a picture here. I just wanted to show it to you. This is right there by Haleiwa, and this whole area, this is an airport, and this whole area today, it's just covered with foliage. But this and at the time this had sugar cane, and it just was filled with it had to be cleared out to be made into this airport. And Dr. Jim Ho, at his young age, he was one of the young boys who helped to work on this airport, and they cleared it out and it was made into an airport. Well, interesting thing about this, once it was done, and during Pearl Harbor when the bombing was happening, these 7 pilots managed, when they heard about the bombing in Honolulu, in Pearl Harbor, they managed to be on the other side of the island, over by the Haleiwa Wailua side. And these pilots jumped into a plane, and as the Japanese bombers were leaving the islands to go back and refill and come back and finish the islands, these pilots went after those Japanese bombers and actually made enough of damages to them that the Japanese plan was that they didn't come back. And so these were the unsung heroes. These are the pilots that people don't know anything about. This is a tiny little treasure, hidden treasure that was never ever shared. And I was really blessed because Dr. Jim Ho, who lived during that time, was able to share that. So he is kind of a, he was retired, and he wrote in his later years, he's kind of like my role model and a mentor. And in his later years, in his 70s, 80s, and 90s, he ended up carrying on a different kind of career where he became a historian, a lecturer, and had an opportunity to be traveling with the cruise ships and sharing stories about the native history of the native folks, just like this one. And I just love knowing that his life, as he toured on the cruise lines, he was able to see many ports of different ports and different countries, different places and cities, and very colorful man. But he would go on his routine cruise lines and share So he had encouraged me to go ahead and continue working with my research of the Kanaka. I followed that path. I enjoy learning more about the native tribes. I think what I love the most is the fact that there's so many similarities in their life values and the way that they shared their, it's very much like the early pioneers. I mean, back when you don't have, you become very generous with what you do have, the little that you have, and you'll share it with your neighbors, guests, family, extended family, people that that you live among in the village. You just share what you have, and this is where I think that is something that appeals to me, and I really do enjoy that. But I also enjoy the fact that how people move from place to place to place, and how they've impacted that community or that area. So I am going to be bringing up more about the people that I have had an opportunity to interview. So bringing it back to what got me started again and doing some of the reflections is when Bill was in the hospital, and I'm laying there, and he's got all these, he's hooked up to all these machines for his heart, his oxygen. He was pretty much in a bad a bad condition when he had his stroke. He nearly died. And when I was recommended highly to take care of his affairs, it did give me an opportunity to step back and take a look and dive deeper into what does Bill's life? How did he live? Who did he impact? What was it that I wanted to share about his life? And one of the aspects that I did not understand, or at least appreciate while we were working together, was the amount of labor of hours of time and his passions in his work of collecting video data. Bill has a huge library of content, and as I start to dive deeper into the work he did, I didn't appreciate it during that time because I was deep in my own career as a kumuhula and as an entertainer. It was not something I had pursued necessarily as a career journey, but my passions kept overriding the work in marketing and in sales and as a teacher that I was involved in. So I was very consumed with my own life and my own goals, my own work. And so I really didn't, I knew that I was just part of what Bill did. When I came in, when he asked me to be a host on his television show, didn't realize what my life was going to be like. And I'll tell you what, I would never trade a thing in my life experiences. I've had some highs and lows. I've dealt with felons. I've dealt with politicians. I've met many. Today they're famous in the world of the Hawaiian community. Many of the artists, I've had an opportunity to be around them and interview them. Robert Cazimero, Kaylee Irishel, Brittany Paiva, Raiatea Helm, the Makaha Sons. I mean, you name it. There's plenty of folks that I had an opportunity to meet. And many of them, people knew who they were and they were famous, and others were just kind of like under the radar. Kind of like what these pilots, where people did not know who they were necessarily, but what they did impacted the world. And that's the blessings that I've had an opportunity to interview, and I really want to be able to share their stories and have others really enjoy what they do. This gentleman, this is a book that I wanted to show. It's called The Kanaka, and it's written, and this is the untold story of Hawaiian pioneers in British Columbia and the Pacific Northwest. Tom Koppel. I had an opportunity to interview him and spend some time with him over at his island. Lives up on Vancouver Island, near Salt Spring, actually on Salt Spring Islands, and it was wonderful to be able to have met him. And he took us on a little tidbit. He took us on a little trip over to see on Salt Springs. There is an area where a church, a rock church, was built by the Hawaiians, and many of the Hawaiians are buried there in their grave sites. And this particular area, it's on a little cove, beautiful. And there's islands. You can just take a look at the islands across the way where Native Hawaiians lived. And kids needed to paddle in or row their way in to go to school from their island to here. Interesting story. That's another little side story we can say later on. But in any event, that book, when I read that book, I realized it opened up my yearning to learn more about the Pacific Northwest Kanaka. And that led me to a place called Kalama. And it also taught me a lot about the different sites and locations around here. I discovered that there's many place names for the local Hawaiians. And so, of course, my curiosity was, why did they come over here, and what did happen to them, and which led to another story down the road, which we'll talk a little bit more about. That is the birth of the Kalama Heritage Festival, the town called Kalama. I want to be able to share with you the island's impact on the people's impact here. There are many of the tribes here that have married and had children from the Hawaiians, and so that in itself is a whole different story. So that leads me to this book called Leaving Paradise. It's about the indigenous Hawaiians in the Pacific Northwest from 1787 to 1898. And it's written by Jean Barnum and Bruce McIntyre Watson. Interesting book to read. In the back of this book, the last third of the book, has a genealogy listing of the different folks and the different names of people that was in their manifests that came in and worked with the Hudson Bay Fur Company and their migration here in those years. Interesting book. It's a good book to read, along with that other Kanaka. Finally, I just wanted to be able to share my heart of being able to reflect on our lives and realize that my husband has had a legacy himself. And I love that his own story, which I hope to be able to share. He's almost 100% Hawaiian. Both his mom and dad's birth certificate lists their heritage as Hawaiian. And so to look at Bill, he has a little bit of German genealogy. We're going to do I think we're going to check it out, a DNA, and see who he really is all about. But in looking at what Bill was, his life story is an example of what folks dealt with in growing up. They had to deal with, here today we had to deal with the COVID. Back then they dealt with what they call the Pake disease, which is leprosy. And Bill's own grandfather contracted leprosy and was, there was a divorce that had to happen because he was shipped off to Molokai. And this is from Kalaupapa, Molokai. This is a newsletter that talks a lot about the Kalaupapa village and where all the patients who were afflicted with leprosy ended up living there, and many of them passed on without family and friends. They literally were shipped off to live a life on their own in isolation with other leprosy family people. And his grandfather is one who was buried in Kalaupapa, and unfortunately he didn't have a headstone or any of that, so many of them were literally forgotten, and so we're this Kalaupapa village is trying to have a memorial, working on and having a memorial with every single person's name on there. It's a lofty, big project, and it is something that both Bill and I plan on supporting and wanting to be able to help them complete that project. So with that being said, as you can see, the idea of watching and helping my husband get to a point of being where he is today. Today, I'm really happy to say that we weathered through every bit of his recovery. To today, now Bill has continued to take on therapy. They've added on physical therapy as well as his occupational therapy. So he goes weekly, 4 times a week, and he's diligent about going and getting his therapies done. And they have done a really good job of being able to have Bill be much more mobile. He's able to do quite a bit with taking care of himself. He's not totally independent, but he's living a more independent lifestyle. He's able to travel. He's working his way towards making his way towards being able to work again. He does love to work, and he does love to be able to utilize his mental capacities. The brain bleed did affect his memory. It did affect, he has a condition called aphasia, so sometimes words are a little bit difficult for him to express. And as he gets more tired, his ability to talk, his mind is going a mile a minute, but that connection isn't quite 100%. So to hear him today, it's been phenomenal to watch him. He's been like a miracle, and I'm very grateful that he had that kind of spirit that persevered and determined to get better, and willfulness to move more into a better quality of life. He is enjoying his life. He's now able to take many vacations and travels, and although we have some challenges that we have to deal with, it's quite interesting that I'm happy to see that he's very happy with his life right now, and that he can continue to live as best quality of life that he can. And so now we're kind of reclaiming what we did. And so stay tuned, because I believe we're going to have some very interesting more stories. I'll give you a clue. We're going to be partnering up with another gentleman, Chip Begay, who started he's phenomenal. He has a TV series called See Us TV. And that man has videos, interesting videos, that we're going to be able to highlight and share some of the folks that have contributed to the legacies of the Hawaiian people and the Native Indian. He's part Apache as tribe, as well as he's lived in Hawaii, and his mom is white, and he married a beautiful woman whose descendants came from the Mayflower. And there are 4 children that they have. No, there are 3 children that they have. Are very interesting, because they speak Hawaiian fluently. And if you were to look at them, you don't see any traces of Hawaiian, but they have mastered the olelo of Hawaii. We'll meet them as well. So with that, we're going to be combining Chip's CS TV and the works he's done through the Apache Wolf Productions, as well as with Bill Nahalea and his work with There in the Islands Hawaii Showcase television, and also many of his miles and miles and miles of footage from early days in on Maui. Very excited to be able to share some of these lost legacy stories, and it just shows that all is not lost. We can relive some of these, not so much for us to go back in time, but more that there's many elements of our past that needs to be going forward with us and we carry today. And there are some of the values of love and legacy and honoring the works of other people. So with that being said, I'm just grateful and blessed to be where I am. I'm Gloria Napua, and a host of There in the Islands and a kumuhula for Halau Hula o Napualani. And I kind of consider myself a little bit of a businesswoman, business builder. I am a big cheerleader of people, and I love seeing their skill sets and what they can contribute to our community. Oh,